Hello, everyone. Welcome to Title Hunt Episode 6. The date is March 16th, 2026, and 2 days ago on Pi Day, I played in a 4-round tournament, um, and the title of this video is not clickbait. The final round, I was paired up against the number 1 ranked Utah chess player. So I will be getting into that game at the end of this video and showing you the proof that he, in fact, is the highest ranked player. But until then, I just wanted to show a couple other games from the tournament. Now, most of the time I was paired up against lower rated opponents, and the games themselves weren't too interesting to go over. I'd say the most interesting one was this game from round 2. Um, my opponent was a 13-22, and I was playing as the white pieces here. Opened with e4, of course. I don't know what else I would play. And my opponent replied with a Scandinavian defense. Now, what I like to do against the Scandinavian is play knight f3. The main line is knight c3, and then, of course, black can play queen to d6, queen to d8, and even queen to a5. This is what I like to play as the Scandinavian. And then white can push d4, go bishop d2, bishop c4, and so on. The reason why I prefer to bring my knight to f3 as white against the Scandinavian is it leaves the option open for you to play both of your pawns to the center, your d and your c pawns. Whereas if you play c3 right away, now the knight is blocking the c pawn. My opponent played bishop g4. I went bishop e2. And then he played e6. Now this is a bit of a strange move. More common is knight c6, going for a quick long castle. There's actually a pretty common trick in this position. It's not too... I wouldn't say many people fall for it, but some people might think that you can win a pawn here as black by taking this knight. The problem is that in this position, white has this tactic, removing the guard, the c6 knight, and with check. So after black recaptures, then you pick up the queen. So that, of course, doesn't work. Now, like I said, most people don't fall for this trap and instead castle long, but then you get into positions, black has a few options here, and I generally like the way that the game goes after that. Now, of course, in this game, like I said, my opponent didn't go into this and played e6 instead. So I castled. He played knight f6. Once again, a little strange that he was refusing to develop his queenside, because that's typically the plan of this variation of the Scandinavian. But I guess it's a fine way to play. So I started just going forward with my plan, going d4 and probably c4 eventually. And yeah, this was another strange move, c6. Once again, like, the c6 move is common in the Scandinavian, but it's more common in other variations. The one where white delays attacking the queen and doesn't play knight c3 right away, it's not as crucial to play this move. You'd rather have your knight on the c6 square. In fact, the top computer move is knight c6 right now for black. So I thought that this was a little strange for sure. So I went ahead with c4. And yeah, it's just this whole thing with like c6, queen a5. This isn't really... I think it was a little bit of a misunderstanding of the opening and the specifics of this variation of the opening by my opponent. Here, I just attacked the queen with bishop d2. There's actually a pretty fun trap in... not this. Where is it? Yes. In this position, if black gives a check and you block, and then if they're not versed in this position enough and go queen b6 to attack your b2 pawn, then you can play c5, and the queen has nowhere to go except to take this b2 pawn. But once that happens, then bishop c3 wins the queen. I mean, you can take the rook, but a rook for a queen is a good trade for white, for sure. So that's kind of just a little side note, a fun little trap in this opening. Unfortunately, because of the c6 move, of course, that's not really on the table. for my opponent to fall into. But that was fine by me. I just figured, you know, bishop d2, I'll develop my pieces with tempo. He, of course, went queen to c7. That's the whole point of playing c6 in the Scandinavian, is to bring your queen here. So I just continued my development, knight c3. He played bishop d6, and here was when I began to sense, like, you know, there's moments in a chess game like this where you actually I'm getting ahead of myself. First I played h3. This is just kind of a nice move in general, because now, you know, if the bishop takes you, I'm fine getting the bishop pair, right? Um, and not damaging my structure at all. So, of course, most likely he's going to bring his bishop back. It's just a nice move to keep pieces from resting on g4. For example, a knight in the future could be kind of scary, maybe with a queen coming to h2. So, and another side note is this does, in certain endgames, just create a luft for your king, so that you can't ever get back rank checkmated, right? So, it's just kind of a nice move to play. Now, here is when I sensed that, you know, it's like, okay, so his king is in the middle. I've basically finished my development, at least of my minor pieces. Of course, you know, I could continue, try to bring my queen somewhere and like bring the rooks, but I figured, you know, now it can't be bad to take the moment to strike in the center. And I wasn't necessarily wrong. It's maybe not the most accurate way to play the position, but it's still very good for white, as you can see here. The point is that I'm kind of ahead in development, right? I've got more of my pieces out. I have a little bit of a space advantage just because my pawns are further advanced. I just have more control over certain squares in my opponent's territory. But the biggest thing is I'm castled and my opponent is not. So if I get a few tempo, I might be able to bring a rook and maybe get a discovered check and, you know, keep my opponent's king in the center, for example. Here, my opponent plays accurately, though. He first takes with the e pawn. You don't want to take with the c pawn, because then what I saw here is I can take, and then that's actually kind of funny. So I was thinking that I was going to try to go for some fork on b5. I guess that's maybe not the most accurate. Yeah, I probably would have sat here and like tried to think more about the position, but um, anyways, it just c takes d5 felt wrong to me somehow. He played accurately and took with the e pawn. Now I recaptured and he castled. So I think that was his whole point, is, um, you know, he takes once just to alleviate some of the pressure. He doesn't want, for example, like in this position, if he castles right away, now I take his e6 pawn, and when he recaptures, his pawn on e6 is really weak because it doesn't have any pawns to support it from behind. So I can, you know, play rook e1, knight g5, and just go after this pawn right away. So he didn't want that to happen, of course, which is why he took and then castled. Smart play by my opponent for sure. Now here I was kind of thinking about how to proceed. Look at this. This is an interesting like positional, I don't know what you'd call it, theme to notice. Look what happens to the evaluation if I take this pawn. I expected that to be bigger. Huh. For some reason, I mean, okay. It's because I have this knight b5 fork at the end of this, picking up the bishop pair. But I'm surprised, quite frankly, that doesn't lose more of the advantage. Because I was thinking, like, it's just not a great idea to help your opponent develop, right? So by taking, I'm just allowing him to bring his pieces out easier. But the problem for me was he's threatening to take my pawn right here, because he's attacking it twice. I'm only defending it once. And I don't want to play a move like bishop c4. It just kind of felt a little wrong. You know, this bishop is doing a good job keeping my knight from not being pinned to my queen. Once it moves away, my knight is now pinned, because if I move it, I'll lose my queen. So here, I sat here for a little bit and found a nice way to indirectly defend the pawn, you would say, by going rook to c1. What I mean by indirectly defend it is, now if black takes, well, this pawn is pinned, and so that won't be very good. And this isn't good either, because I can take, and yeah, it's just it's going to be pretty pretty difficult for... Yeah, I'm going to go bishop c3, and, I've got a lot of activity, and black is still lagging in development. So instead here, my opponent plays a pretty big mistake, I would say. Maybe missing some tactics I have. He plays bishop f4. So there's a couple moves that are good here, but by far the best move, hopefully you could find this. I just barely played rook c1, setting up this attack potentially on the queen. You might say, like, well, there's a bunch of pieces in between the rook and the queen right now. Yeah, but that can change really quickly in chess. So the move is knight to b5. And the reason why this is so good is that the queen will no longer be able to stay on this diagonal, so she won't be defending the bishop anymore. So after queen b6, which is what my opponent played, I can take the bishop. And now, if he takes my knight, well, he's doubled his pawns, he's opened up my rook, I have a passed d-pawn, and I have the bishop pair. Like, these advantages just kind of start building up over time, and he's underdeveloped. So small advantages like this is how your position can build up to be plus 2.6 like it is right here. Now here my opponent instead took my knight, which I thought was a pretty clever move because I can just take with my bishop and he just would take with the queen. I didn't really see a way to continue here. It's saying bishop d6, and what if the rook attacks you? Bishop e7? Ah, I see. So the rook can't really attack your bishop, so it would maybe go rook e8. And then you take. Ah, yes. Yeah. Okay. So there were some tactics involved, but it was like a 5-move line. And I just I wanted to force him to take my knight with a pawn. So instead I played g takes. I figured, I'm damaging my structure, but once again, I have so many advantages in this position. I'm going to move my king, I'm going to get my rook on the g file, and his pieces are all just kind of off to the side here, not really doing anything. So now, of course, he takes my knight. I should have just played bishop c7 right away. Bishop c7, queen a6, because I saw here, this is a really funny tactic. The queen has to go to a6. Like, there's no other square that she's safe, which is kind of a crazy little, like, thing. Then I could go queen b3 and threaten this pawn. I'm not exactly sure why I didn't go for this first, honestly. I think I didn't really like how my bishop could be attacked, but instead I went queen b3 first, which is inaccurate because he can play knight h5, and now his queen can come out this way when I play bishop c7. I still played it, though, because after this check, I'm going to slide my king over. Now, this was the strangest part of the game to me. I thought, well, h3 is weak. If I go king h1, he's going to go queen f5, and this is just kind of annoying to defend. Now, I can just play f4, which, honestly, I didn't really think this far ahead. I probably should have, but f4 defends my pawn with the queen, which is kind of a crazy move. So instead, I played what I thought was a lot more natural, just king h2, because my king is safe on this diagonal because of my bishop, and now he defends h3. Apparently, this wasn't the most accurate, though. Once again, the reason why is kind of hard to understand, so I think I played it fine. White still has an advantage here for sure. And of course, yeah, immediately he does make a mistake. A6, right when I saw a6, I'm like, okay, I've just won this game basically because the b5 pawn should be the least of his concerns right now, right? Like, there's just too much stuff going on for him to be defending it. So yeah, here I just attacked his rook with my queen. Sorry, wow, I switched those pieces up. I attacked his queen with my rook with rook g1. When his queen slid over, oh yes, this was a nice move. I saw that when I play f4, his knight is under attack. It no longer has any retreating squares. G6 doesn't work because the pawn isn't actually defending anything because it's pinned, so I can just take it. And so his only move, really, I mean, I guess he could have played like queen h6, but that just looks ridiculous, His only move with the knight, really, would be to take this pawn. And at first it kind of looks like, like, it's defended, by the queen. So if I just take, then he can take. And yeah, that's almost equal now for white. The only move here is to trade queens, actually. So, and it maybe looks a little scary because it's like, and he's going to, threaten my bishop and threaten a fork. But I saw here that I have queen to f3, pinning the knight, because if you take the bishop, well, once again, this pawn isn't actually defending anything because it's pinned. So I would just be picking up the queen here. Now, I saw he can take this pawn, which is a little sneaky, right? If I try to take the queen, well, now his knight defends the queen, and I'm no longer up any material. In fact, I'm down 2 points of material, 2 pawns, it looks like. But the crazy thing to me is that it's still equal. This position right here in the evaluation should be like a lesson to everybody about the value of piece activity, right? Like down 2 pawns right here, black has these 2 extra pawns, and it's basically equal just because of the activity of all of my pieces. So anyways, obviously though, like I want to avoid that position because I knew that I had a clear advantage here. So of course after this move I can just take the knight. When he takes my f2 pawn with his queen, which is what happened in the game, I block with my rook, thinking, maybe I'll double up my rooks on the open g file. Depends on what he plays. He played queen to f6, which just allowed me to go bishop e5. And honestly, the rest of this game doesn't really need much commentary. Pretty straightforward. He slid his queen over. This is safe for the queen and still defends g7, even though it doesn't actually defend g7. Because not only am I getting a pawn and a queen for a rook and a bishop, which is a good trade, but this king is now wide open. Once again, his pieces still are so undeveloped. All of these are just on the back rank. And this is actually pretty common. Well, I don't know about pretty common, but it's a fairly common mating pattern here. You play queen g5 check, preventing the king from coming out this way. So the king is forced here. And then you play queen f6. So now the only move is here, and you've set up the conditions for a checkmate with the rook. Now, in the game, I think he just resigned here. I can't remember. But if not, of course, it was just one move later. And I thought it was interesting. These pieces never moved. And I guess technically this one didn't either, unless you count the castle, like the castling move as the rook moving. But that piece didn't move on its own, ever. So, yeah, pretty strong win for me here. I feel like a good showcase of how to just put pressure on an opponent who's maybe playing suboptimally in the opening. And yeah, I was pretty proud of that game. So moving on now to the purpose of this video, I would say the climax or whatever, the main show. As some background, when I signed up for this tournament, I noticed that I had the second highest rating at 1881, and the highest rated player was a national master, 2232. And I looked him up, and sure enough, he's the number one. Let me show you. Yeah, right here. He's the number one ranked player in the state of Utah at 2232. Now, people from other states who are watching this, you might be surprised, but yes, there's not really much competition in Utah. This is out of active players, by the way. I'm sure that there's lots of retired people that have higher ratings than this, but they just haven't played in tournaments for, I can't remember what the cutoff is. I think it's a couple of years before you're not counted in like the rankings. But anyways, so he's the highest rated active player. I guess you might be able to say that that's technically not accurate that he's the highest rated, but according to USCF, he is number one. So that's what I'm going with. So yeah, I just wanted to play well enough this tournament to be able to face him at some point, because of course he's going to be winning all of his games. If I lose round 2, odds of me playing him are almost 0. So every game was that was the main stress of each of the games, was like, I just need to play well so that I can go up against him in the final round. And sure enough, round 3, I beat my opponent. He beat his opponent. We both only had 3 points. Well, I should say we were the only people with 3 points out of 4. And so we got paired up for round 4. And this was the game. So I was white, and I played e4. Now, the funny thing is, after the game, he told me that he usually plays the Caro-Kann defense, but right before we started the game, I was showing one of my friends um, a game that I had played at a tournament recently where um, I played the fantasy Caro-Kann, and my opponent went queen b6, and we had this whole line. And so my opponent David here, after the game, told me that he saw me showing that game to my friend and decided to instead play the Sicilian defense, because he was like, I just I don't have a strong repertoire against the fantasy. So it's kind of funny. Like, I realized that right as I was showing the game to my friend. I'm like, wait a second, if he plays the Caro-Kann, like, now he knows that I play the fantasy. um, so that was maybe a little, you know uh, not the smartest of me to like reveal my opening preparation right before a game, but I think it still turned out to be a good game, as we will see. So after e4 c5, my favorite move is a3. The computer, of course, isn't going to like it because computers just don't like anything. Um, but I've had tons of success. I can't remember if I go here, my games. Yeah, my win rate is specifically after knight c6. It's 60% with 225 games on chess.com. My win rate is 60%, 36% loss, and then 4% drawn. That's a crazy win rate for playing 225 games. Now, unfortunately, in this game, my opponent did not play knight c6, but instead went d5. This is one of the moves. So you can either play knight c6, d5, g6 is like the engine's choice, and it's what most master level players play. Um, and then there's even like, well, knight f6 is just bad, I think, because I just push e5 and but anyways, those are the main three moves. He goes with d5, and after takes, and knight c3, which was played, and then queen d8. It's kind of like a Sicilian defense where black plays queen d8, and then white pushes a3 and black pushes c5. So, if you can picture these pawns being back here, it's pretty much exactly just a Scandinavian defense. Now here I played bishop c4, just developing my bishop. He played knight f6. I went d3, and it is really interesting because he played bishop f5, and right as he played it, I thought, that is a strange move because I just barely played d3, and then you just bring your bishop to f5, facing this like pawn wall that I've just put up. At the very least, you'd think like, bishop g4, like maybe gaining a tempo on the queen or something. I don't know. Like, it's still, I don't know. It just seemed kind of strange to put it, facing my pawns that I just barely set up. And I'm technically right. Now, the only way to prove it as white that I'm better in this position is to play queen f3, which I missed, admittedly. Having a double attack here and here, black would be forced to play like queen d7. And there's just a slight edge for white in this position. But instead, I just developed my knight. And then once again, a kind of strange, like non-typical decision, I would say. Usually you want your knight to be more in the center. On like c6, for example, it controls more squares. So it was a little strange playing knight bd7. I just castled. Of course, he goes e6 to get his dark squared bishop out and stop my bishop from putting pressure on his f7 pawn. I went h3. I didn't want anything to be able to come to g4, and I wanted to play knight h4 without, having the bishop run away to g4, for example. He continued developing. I brought out my rook. He castles, and I play knight h4, going after his bishop to win the bishop pair. Now, this is a really solid setup of pawns right here. I usually enjoy playing these kinds of positions as black because pretty much the only way for white to attack your king is to get a knight here and a queen like here. and then go for like h7, h8, you know? But that's really hard to set up, especially currently, so his position is pretty solid. But I'm glad here I found the best move, queen f3. Uh, this move is possible because I control e5. If I hadn't played rook e1, like, let's just, for example, go, not change too much in the position. I don't know how exactly to do that, but like, let's go here, here, here. Now, oh, well, okay, so yeah, let's like go here instead. Now if I go queen f3, he has knight e5. Yeah, forking my queen and bishop. But because I have played rook e1, that's not possible. So he played queen f8 or queen c8 to defend b7, which I was putting pressure on. I developed out my bishop to f4. He goes a6. I thought that he was going to go for b5 at some point because that's usually what people do against the Menger when you bring your bishop out to c4. They'll go a6, b5 to just kind of build up their pawns on the center, gain some space. Sorry, on the queen side, and gain some space there. Which is why I played bishop a2. It's not the most accurate move, but it's fine. Just you. It's nice to have b5 not come with a tempo against your bishop. What I mean by that is if you leave your bishop here and black goes b5, you're forced to respond to that move and go bishop a2. But when you've gone bishop a2, now if b5 comes, you might have the chance to do something else that might be more beneficial. So after bishop a2, right, yeah, he played knight b6, which once again I kind of felt was a little strange just because I haven't ever seen this like idea in this opening before, going knight b6. Usually people go b5, but this is a totally fine way to play. Here, I noticing that his bishop is undefended, and there might be some tactics potentially. I just brought my bishop here to, you know, potentially pin the knight. He defends his bishop, and now I really wasn't sure what to play here, and I was starting to get lower on time. I didn't want to go too low against him, right? I'm feeling the pressure of this game. So I decided to, well, first I brought my rook to the center. He did as well, and then I decided to trade off some pieces. Now, this wasn't the best decision. I should have just gone h4 and kind of defended my position, waited for him to commit something else, and gone from there. Instead, I tried to force some things to happen, and after knight takes, of course I can't take the knight or else he takes my bishop. So I'm forced to take his bishop. And now I saw here he doesn't have a desperado. Desperado being like, I'm going to lose my knight anyways, so I will take as much as I can going out. The problem is he doesn't have that tactic here because I can take his rook and attack his queen. So now if he takes my bishop, I just take his knight and I'm up a piece, right? Oh no, I'm up a full rook. Holy cow! Yeah, it's just bad. And if he takes my rook with his knight, well then it's even worse. I take his queen. So he doesn't have that desperado. Best move for him is just to take the knight. Now I took with the rook. I didn't want to take with this pawn because I don't know. Maybe I should have thought about this more because the pawn stops his knight from coming to d5, but I just kind of wanted to keep my queen open, keep my rook open, and keep my pawns more connected here and prevent his rook from getting more activity. And I thought, rook e4, my rook's maybe going to be more active. It doesn't have a whole lot of squares to move to right now. Here, he went rook d6. I wasn't really exactly sure what the point of this move was. I guess just to defend everything on the 6th rank, kind of stop any sort of sacrifice ideas. I brought my other rook to this e-file, and he played queen f6. Now here, once again, I was getting low on time. I was just trying to find moves that didn't make me lose. Here, I missed a nice tactic. I thought his queen is going to take this pawn on b2 and fork my bishop and my a3 pawn, and I cannot lose that, right? Like, I can't let him take both of these pawns. He's just going to start pushing his a pawn and promote it. So I thought queen takes f6 is forced. Unfortunately, I missed a crazy tactic here. Rook f4. inviting him to take this b2 pawn. But now I have bishop takes pawn. His pawn is pinned, right? Because I would take his rook, and I think it's a mate actually. Yeah, I have like queen f7, and I'm going to be coming in to g8, queen h8. Like, there's certain points where you don't really need to calculate further. Like, if his king is on g5 and my pieces are infiltrating his position, there's got to be a mate somewhere. There's like 5 different mates here, probably more. So there's, you know, um, that's what happens if he takes the bishop with the pawn. If he takes the rook with the rook, well, then I take his rook, and once again, it's pinned. Now, what happens if he doesn't take, for example? Well, um, I mean, there's not really anything he can do because I'm threatening to take this pawn. Like, let's say he just, I don't know, like moves his knight or something. I'm going to take. If he goes over, it's just checkmate with the rook. So he has to take me, and then here it's actually mate in 10. If you check and then here and then take, yeah, that's nice because I mean, he's gonna just get completely bulldozed. But none of this happened, unfortunately, because I missed the knight or the nice bishop e6 sacrifice. Definitely should have been looking for those kinds of opportunities more. Of course, queen b2 isn't forced, but the best move is for black to just go back. And now, you know, he's lost a tempo. Like, why did he just do all this? And I'm putting some pressure on his position. Instead, I just, like I said, I was like, oh, I'll just trade the queens. I think this is forced. And I missed that he was just going to be putting a lot of pressure on me, and these pawns ended up being really solid. He makes a nice pawn circle here, so you know, he wins the pattern mini game of chess. I went rook e5. I knew that he could play. Oh, man, I always hit the wrong key, and then it goes to the end of the game. I knew that here he could go knight d7 and gain a tempo on my rook, but I figured that I'll just slide back to e3, and I felt like maybe this knight was better here to like jump into d5. He instead, though, because he's a national master, found the best square for this knight, which is d4, and the route to get there is b8, c6, and then d4, which is why he played knight b8. Normally a move like this would be really weird, but there's just not really much I can do here. You know, if I was more active, if I could create more threats, then this might just be too slow. But because I don't really have anything to do, he has time for this. I went f3 to maybe bring my king at some point. Now here, I started getting a little worried because I'm like, oh, he's going to go, you know, knight c6. Like, if I just go king f2, he's going to go knight c6. And he's threatening to go knight d4. I'm like, what am I going to do, you know? So I went bishop a2, anticipating that he was going to go knight c6. Then I went king f2. I guess this would just transpose to this line, but after knight d4, I didn't really want to play rook c1. I just felt like this was really, like, I don't know, really passive, but I really didn't want to lose this c2 pawn, because if I play something like rook e5, which is technically the top move of the computer, he takes my pawn and goes back, and even when I take this, like, I just felt like my d3 pawn was just going to be the end of my game. Now, I guess maybe the point is that I sacrifice this pawn being a weakness for activity of my rooks, but I didn't really think about that. I was like, okay, I will just defend it with the bishop. I know this looks really ugly. It is ugly, but I'm like, I'm holding. I'm just going to see if he, you know, makes any mistakes coming up here. Now, here, I actually saw his best move, which I'm glad I did. I was like, oh boy, rook b6. What do I do here? If I go b3, he can honestly just like go back. And the point is that now my bishop is, it's going to be harder for me to get my bishop out of here, right? Like, now I'd have to go b4 or something in order to get my bishop out through this diagonal. But even here, he can go like knight b5. If I go a4, he goes knight c3, and like, this bishop is just so sad. Like, it's just locked in jail, right? So I saw all this. I'm like, oh no, like, you know, he's got rook b6, and you know, once I said, like I said, It is winning for black, but he instead played f4, which is still he's still got a pretty big advantage. But this is when I was like, okay, well, I think I think that that's actually not too bad for me. I'm gonna go rook e4. Um, I saw that my rook is almost getting trapped, right? It's close, but he's gonna have to defend this f4 pawn. Now, actually, if he goes f5, the f4 pawn I thought was untouchable because of g5. Yes, yeah, you would have to sacrifice your rook for the knight, and I thought that that was just losing. Um, but after f5, I just would have gone rook e5, and the main point I saw is that the knight would have to like drop back to c6 in order to attack this rook. Pretend like c5 is guarded. You know, maybe he plays b6 first, and then he drops back. Um, I can always so like here pretend like if he'd guarded c5, I can always just bring my rook back to e2. The whole point is that I just noticed, okay, my rook always can go back to e2 if it needs to, so I don't feel like I'm in danger of being trapped here. After rook e4, he saw his threat on the f4 pawn, and here he makes his first big mistake of the game, I would say. He plays g5. Um, it's kind of hard to really explain like why this is a mistake, but I feel like the way to explain it is just to show White's best move, which is h4. Whenever your opponent has like a pawn chain, and you want to try to take the front pawn, the best way to do that is to attack the base of the chain, right? So by playing h4, I'm inviting him to take this pawn because then I would take his f pawn, and his h pawn is now weak. I would probably be picking it up soon, um, and then maybe be up a pawn even in this endgame. So of course he doesn't take me. He instead plays knight back to c6. Now this is also a mistake. I saw that he was going to maybe go for this defensive setup where he brings his knight back and defends his f pawn with his e pawn. So after f takes g5, he went e5. Now I think what he was banking on is that his rook is going to be able to come over here and take my pawn. Like at this point, and keep in mind, at this point I'm down to like 3 minutes, and he still has 10 minutes. So I'm starting to freak out. Like, wait a second, I think I'm coming back in this game. I'm up a pawn now. I think he was banking on going rook g6 and taking this pawn. Uh, but here I saw a couple ways to defend um, g5. The first one I was thinking about was rook h1, so that after rook g6 I can go h5. And this does look good for me. I wasn't really sure though after like king g7, maybe he gets his other rook involved, and it just looked a little bit complicated to me. What I thought here was, okay, um, my king isn't really doing that much. I'd say so here in this position my weakest piece is by far my bishop. But other than that, I think my second weakest piece is my king. Oh, sorry, it was this position. So my second weakest piece is my king. So I'm going to play g3 to try to activate my king a little bit more. Maybe come up and help support my pawns on the king side. Yes. Um, I saw here, of course, that after rook g6, I can take, and just be up a pawn. And I felt like this was pretty nice for me. I'm going to go bishop a2, threaten his f7 pawn. And I'm right here. If he went into this, of course he didn't. He instead took my pawn here, took, and then played rook g6. I here I was low on time. I didn't have enough time to think. The best move here is rook g4, and you'll see why in a second. Instead, I played f4, but the problem is that he has f6. Wait a second. No, f6 is a mistake, apparently. He had to go e takes f4, king takes f4, rook d5. Oh, yeah. And if I try to defend my pawn, he's going to go knight d4, threaten... Not here. What is he threatening? What if I just, like, attack the knight? He's threatening rook f5? Oh, yeah. And just kind of come in with his rook and his knight. Maybe... Oh, is it just a perpetual? Maybe? I don't know. Anyways, instead here he plays f6. Now, of course, my pawn is pinned, so I can't take f6 with my g pawn. And if I try to go like g4, I thought that he could like maybe go here and threaten a fork. And if I, I was just like, I don't think that this is the like king g4 is a great move for me. Instead, I took his e pawn, um, and I saw if he takes my pawn on g5, which is what he did, I'm gonna block with my rook. We'll trade, and I thought he's gonna take with his knight. I'm gonna go king f5. Um, he's gonna go like king g7 to defend the pawn, and then I'm gonna go bishop a2, and like my bishop is just way better than this knight, and I'm putting some pressure on his pawn and his rook. I think my rook is better than his rook. Like I was like, I think my pieces are better in this position. But here he took with the pawn, and I was like, wait, that's I didn't even consider this for some reason. I don't know why, but I just thought that knight takes was much more natural. But anyways, after he took with the pawn, there's a bug in my face. After he took with the pawn, um, I was like, okay, well, like I kind of briefly mentioned before, one of the ways to think about chess, think about the plans that you can make is identifying your worst piece in a position and trying to improve it. So here, my worst piece, undoubtedly, by far, is this bishop on b1. Right now, it is literally controlling as many squares as a pawn. Like, that is how sad it is. It's literally just a pawn that, spawned on the back rank. So to fix that, I played bishop a2. Now it's on this nice long diagonal. It's controlling some key squares around his king. He went king g7, and here I was looking at ways to try to get into his position up here, and played rook f1. It's not the most accurate, but he did end up making a mistake after this, so I think it was pretty good practically. The threat, of course, is to go rook f7 and just fork him right away. And if he goes rook d7, um, did he go? Oh yeah, he went rook d7 in the game. Yeah, after rook d7, I saw I can get my king into his position. This looked super scary, and I had to spend, just a little bit making sure that it wasn't losing. It looks like he has this skewer, not this skewer, this skewer, and he would if not for my bishop that I just barely moved to a2, right? The sniper bishop guarding against the skewer. Um, so it was a little bit scary, and like not only that, but so there's like the skewer that you're looking out for, but it also puts the king and the rook in forking distance. Like if the knight was here, it would be able to fork me and the rook. So like it's just a really scary move to play over the board in time pressure. You're just not sure like, is there any tactic? Okay, I don't think there is. Um, of course, he can play knight d4 check, but then I take his e5 pawn, and if he goes for my c2 pawn, then apparently I play rook g1, and he has to go to the h. Oh yeah, he has to go to the h file because otherwise I play king f6, set up a mate threat. When he checks me, I block, and the only thing he can do to stop mate is sack his rook. That's crazy. So he has to go to the h file, and now his king is just cut off from the game. Wow. Okay. I just had a feeling, I didn't calculate that far, to be honest, but I just had a feeling that if he did do this, I was just better. I don't know. It's just kind of one of those intuition feelings that you get, He did not go for this, though. Instead, here, he makes... so it's kind of interesting. Like, right here, it's almost equal. He makes an inaccuracy, but then the big mistake comes right here. He plays king f8. And right when he played king f8, I thought, wait a second. Don't I just win right away? I go king e6 and I win the rook, right? And then I saw, he goes king e8 and he guards his rook. And my king, it's actually maybe a little weak here. Like, he might be able to start, setting up some things. Now, my bishop still guards against any skewers, so that's at least okay. But I was, he maybe can start checking me with his rook. But then I calculated here, right? King e6, king e8 is forced, or else I take the rook. By the way, just in case anybody was wondering, king e6, the reason why he can't move the rook is because it's a discovered check, right? But here, I found, in this position, I thought, okay, um, right, I don't want him to be able to start checking me, like with his knight either. I found this nice move. I think I haven't done game review on it with chess.com. I think it would give it a brilliant move because it's like the only good move in the position. Rook to f8. Look at that move. King f8 is forced. Now I take the rook. So it's not really a rook sacrifice. I mean, it kind of is, right? I put the rook on a square that's, not defended at all. The point is that this endgame, um, endgames are tricky, and I understand, like, sometimes it's hard to understand, to be like, uh, you know, oh, this person's winning in this endgame, this person is, it's a draw, sometimes it feels like magic. But one thing to think about endgames, to analyze them correctly, is, of course, material count, minor piece activity, and king activity. And then, like, passed pawns, right? Here, nobody has any passed pawns, and material is equal. Now, one advantage I have in my favor is I have a bishop, which is typically better than a knight, um, just because it, moves farther, it controls more squares. Um, so I have that advantage, but the biggest advantage is king activity. My king, I don't think I've ever played an endgame like this, where my king is 10 times more active than his king, right? Like, my king is threatening all sorts of forks and just to go take all of the pawns in his position, and his king is just off in the sidelines, and my king is stopping him from coming in. Like, and the bishop is stopping him from getting any closer. He's just, I mean, he can go here, but like, I was like, right when I got to this position, I thought I've just won. Like, there's no way I can lose this position. At the very least, I've got a draw, but like, there's no way. In fact, if just to demonstrate how much king activity matters, if we shuffle, so I'm just going to do this just to illustrate this. If we just shuffle back and forth, shuffle, 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 shuffle. Look at this. It's a draw. Zeros. Completely equal, right? Because my king is, it's not nearly as active as it was before. So yeah, this was one of my favorite games I played because we got to this position and I was just like, oh, I think I've just won. He went knight d4. Of course, I went c3, not letting him take my c2 pawn. And here I was really careful to make sure he couldn't get his knight to d1 easily. If he can get his knight to d1, then he can take one of these two pawns, because either he takes the b2 pawn or I move it and he takes the c3 pawn. But one thing to, well, because of the way that the knight moves, some squares look close but are actually hard to get to. Like, I don't know if you knew this, but the amount of moves it takes for a knight to get to the edge of the board from the other edge is 4. You go 1, wait, not that. 1, 2, and then, like, 3, 4 to get to the other edge. The amount of moves it takes for a knight to get from the same square to this square, so like 2 squares away, is also 4. If you don't believe me, you can try it. Like 1, 2, 3, 4. That's the quickest way to get there. So sometimes, like, knights are really tricky to move around. The only way for him to get to d1 is to go, like, through e2 or f2, so he could go, like, here and then, like, here and here, but it would just take, like, 3 turns to even get here. And by then, I can just take all of his pawns with my king. I meant to move that there. Yeah. So anyways, I went c3. He played knight f3, and I was like, oh, fork. I just forked his knight and his pawn. Now, it's not totally a fork because he has knight e1, and if I take his pawn, I'm still winning, but I just didn't like giving him this passed e pawn. And also he's attacking b2. Like, this is just what I wanted to avoid, especially because I was down to like a minute at this point. So I didn't want to have to calculate anything like this. But what I saw here is after knight e1, this is another common pattern. The knight, this is, like I said, one of the reasons why the bishop is better than the knight in most cases is there's this pattern. The knight moves like this on the edge of the board. If a bishop stands 3 squares away from it, horizontally or vertically, it guards all of the squares that the knight can move to. Whoops, not that. So when he moved knight e1, I was like, okay, I'll go bishop e4. Technically, his knight can go to c2, but then, like, where is it going to go, right? Like, it'd have to go here. His knight's just kind of in an awkward position. And from here, he started to bring his king, but I went king king d6, forking his pawns. He defended his c pawn. I took that pawn. He brought his king, tried to stop me from getting in to take these pawns. But here I played d4, and his knight is never going to be able to move again. So um, if he takes, I just take, and then I can, I mean, I can easily win this position when his knight literally has no moves, right? Instead, though, he pushed the pawn, so I just took it. He started bringing his king, but my bishop and my pawn are causing there to be like a barrier that the king has to go all the way around if he wants to try to get my bishop. So it would just be too slow. In that time, I could go take all of his pawns. In this position, he took my pawn, I took him, and he resigned. So just to summarize it all up, I went to this tournament thinking, oh, I might play against the number 1 rated player. That would be a nice game, really instructive. And I won. I beat a national master first. From what I can remember, my first ever win against a titled player. Also came against the highest rated player in my state. This was a really exciting game. Of course, I ended up winning the whole tournament. So that was a great morale boost, I would say, for my goal to gain a National Master title eventually in the future. It feels within reach. If I'm able to beat National Masters, then, why can't I be one? So just wanted to share that good news with everybody. And if you have any questions, chess questions, you can leave them in the comments. And I will see you guys later.